Create enriching experiences beyond the classroom through ACSI Student Leadership and Learning with Emily Pigott.
Well, hello and welcome to the Student Leadership and Learning Podcast, where we journey together to impact, influence, and equip today's students to lead with intentionality and purpose. Well, as always, I'm your host, Emily Pigott, and it is my hope and prayer that as we journey together, as we learn together about these amazing students that we serve today, we will continually reaffirm our why. Now, let me start with a scenario that might feel a little familiar. You have a student who is academically strong, they're responsible, they're polite, they're reliable. Faces are coming to your mind right now, I know. They get good grades, they follow the rules, they do what's expected. And then you think, I've got a great leader in the making here. And you put them in a leadership situation. And then group work falls apart, or decision-making stalls, or instead of dealing with potential conflict that, of course, always will arise, it's avoided or mishandled, and ownership begins to disappear. And you find yourself thinking, how can a student that was so capable be so unprepared to lead? Well, today we're talking about the leadership gap, the growing disconnect between academic success and leadership maturity. So really, let's ponder the question of, why do capable students often lack leadership readiness? And of course, what can we do about it? So let's name something that many educators see but don't always have language for. So students today are often high achieving, they're highly structured, they're highly supported. Yes, there's some apathy built in there, but on the surface, when we're looking at our high achieving students, those things are easy descriptors of them. But that's not always an indicator of leadership readiness. This is not a criticism of students. Of course, I'm the biggest raving fan of them. It's an observation of the systems and the things that are surrounding them and impacting them. And in Luke 12:48, it says, "For everyone who's given much, much will be required." And that's a heavy weight for our students. See, readiness, it's not automatic. Even though they may be wired for things that on the surface look ready and amazing, leadership is about formation. It will not come automatically. Leaders aren't just automatically born. They are created through a process. So research and executive function, let's really drill down in this. It says skills like decision-making, emotional regulation, perspective taking, problem solving, all of those things develop over time. If we think back to us as emerging leaders, of course, those are things that when you look back to where you've come and, oh my goodness, I can't believe I made those decisions and thought they were good back in the day, our students are going through the same thing, of course, in a much more complicated world. And they're going to develop these things through practice. Leadership maturity requires more than that intelligence that we sometimes use as a leadership readiness filter. It requires formation. So let me share a moment that really stood out in my life. So I once worked with a group of students who were, by every external measure, outstanding. Strong academically, very impressive resumes, community service, you name it, they were doing it. And of course, they held all of the leadership titles. And yet, when they got into situations where ambiguity or conflict came, they froze. They waited, they stepped back, and they waited for somebody else to make the decision. They avoided responsibility, and they struggled to navigate with discernment. And that's when I realized we've done an excellent job helping them succeed, but not always an intentional job helping them lead. So growth requires intentional progression, not just leadership opportunities. The best thing you can do for your students is not only to provide them with opportunities to lead, but also to learn how to lead. This is the part that makes people nervous. And I know that. But if you have leadership opportunities without a leadership development plan, your students will struggle, just like we would have struggled. And I love how Jesus, when he was developing his disciples, He never assumed readiness. He formed it. He was constantly teaching his disciples, oftentimes through questions. Those are my favorite. He didn't just tell them what to do. He walked with them through it. He walked with them through failure, through correction, through responsibility. And he always took the time to reflect. That's the level that in our busyness, allowing those moments of stillness and reflection become very rare. You see, leadership maturity, it can't be rushed because it's cultivated. And as Jesus walked with his disciples, he gradually increased responsibility. He didn't just dump it all at once, thankfully, because the small bits that he gave were fumbled a little bit. No judgment. I'm sure we would have fumbled as well. But Jesus increased responsibility so that they could observe and then participate and then lead and then multiply. That multiplication of leaders is what we ultimately want from our students, because formation preceded influence, not the other way around. See, leadership readiness reveals a few consistent truths. Students often lack, think about this, decision-making confidence. Especially today, there is a natural inclination for them to go to a source that will make the decision for them. It could be a teacher, an advisor, a mentor, a friend. It could be AI. But they will lack decision-making confidence. We have to build that confidence in them. They lack sometimes emotional regulation. They can get all stirred up. And to help, we need to help them go, all right, let's take a deep breath and let's really look at the scenario that we're truly facing in this moment. They sometimes lack ownership under pressure. So when the stakes raise and the pressure rises, students have an inclination to lean, pull back, and push someone else forward that can own the scenario when the pressure rises. We've got to recognize these things. And perseverance, when things get messy, that is a struggle with this generation. And again, this isn't because they're unwilling, but because they've had limited opportunities to practice these skills. And that's where I want to make sure, as we're going through today, this is not an indication of students' ability. If they lack any skill, that is our opportunity to lean in and provide them practice so that they can develop these skills. When environments overstructure everything, so when we script, either maybe parents do or educators do, when we script how everything is going to run, risk decreases, mistakes are minimized, and when that happens, growth slows. Leadership maturity, it's forged. It's dealt with through the pressure, through the struggles and the making good decisions, and sometimes making ones that aren't so good. But leadership maturity is forged. It is not granted. So let's get very practical for a moment. If leadership readiness doesn't happen automatically, then it must be intentionally developed. You would agree? So here's a simple K-12 leadership progression that every educator can apply across the ages. So if we walk this through and we look at this holistically, because we never want to just look at leadership as something that happens in high school and neglect that leadership development should start at the elementary level. You see, stage one, it's dependence, early elementary. What's our focus there? Our focus is establishing trust and responsibility and belonging. Students learn, I'm part of a community. And they also learn, my choices, they matter. So how can we develop that in students? Some simple practices, some responsibilities, small ones. This is early elementary, so small responsibilities. Guided decision making. We're not making the decision for them. Through guided questioning in a process, we're helping them arrive at decisions, and their brain is getting wired on how to do that. It's mapping it out. And then naming character traits, naming the things that we want to see again and again in students. Now then, as they progress and we move into upper elementary, now we move into participation. So our focus now is contribution and voice. So students begin to share ideas. They begin to participate in group discussions. They learn cooperation, and some practices to develop that are collaborative learning. Let's give them an opportunity. We know Gen Alpha, Gen Z, they're wired for collaboration. That's how their brains have just been hardwired through their exposure to social media and to all the technology tools that are out there. Another practice is structured student voice. This is where we begin to push them out and help them find their voice. And then allowing them, when they have an impactful moment, to reflect on that. And then stage 3, okay, now we're in middle school. Love middle school. Middle school, some of my favorite years, because this is where responsibility and follow through really amp up. This is the critical stage. We cannot neglect leadership development in middle school. Students practice in middle school how to manage tasks. See, now we're moving into the management spot of it, how to navigate conflict. Let's not have them avoid it. Let's navigate through it. And then they begin to learn from their mistakes, because yes, we know middle schoolers will make their fair share of mistakes, but that means they're learning at a rapid pace, right? So positively looking at that. Practice. How can we put this into practice? Student-led projects. Let's let them start to lead. Real consequences to decisions. And if we're going to have real consequences to decisions, both successful and perhaps not successful, we have to give them the opportunity to really, truly lead something that matters. And then how do we help our students? We coach them, and instead of rescuing them. And then, of course, now we move into our high school. This is the influence stage. This is where leadership with integrity becomes our focus, because students are learning advocacy, they're learning discernment, and of course, ultimately, they're learning servant leadership, as Mark 10:45 defines it. Jesus came to serve and not to be served. This is where we begin to focus our students on how to lead from the posture of humble service. So some applicable practices for them. Mentoring younger students. Very, very impactful in the lives of high school students. Many of our schools do that. And every school that does this, it is a positive experience for both the younger students and the older students. Leading initiatives. This is where we want to give them even more responsibility than might make us comfortable, and let them lead through it. And then, of course, we want to have them reflect on their influence. What did they do well? How did that influence work? Because influence is not always positive. So if they influenced a scenario and there was a negative result, let's reflect on that. Let's talk it through. Let's learn and grow from it. And of course, stage 5, this is multiplication. This is our portrait of a graduate. These are the students we are sending on and out into the mission field. They go from, as Jeremiah 12:5 defines it, they go from the foot race into the horse race. So we're focusing now on legacy and service. We're asking students to ponder, how do I use my influence for others? How am I helping myself and others grow? And they can do this through peer leadership, through service learning, and of course, always again, now where we were doing reflecting on their influence, now we're reflecting on their leadership. So what can you do as an educator? What can you shift right now, today, practically? You don't need a new program. You need a new lens, perhaps. So try this. Ask, where is this student on the progression? Like, where are they in their leadership journey? That's a great way to figure out how to position them to grow. Increase responsibility gradually. I am in no way advocating for us to just dump a whole bunch of responsibility on unready students. You and I both know that would be a disaster. Allow productive struggle. Let's not pull them out of the pool right when they're learning how to keep themselves afloat. Allow some struggle. I'm not saying to allow them to sink. I said allow them to struggle. And then, of course, reflect regularly always looking at how did I handle that? Was it good? And how can I improve in the future? I love 1 Timothy 4:12 because it makes us focus in on what matters. It says, let no one despise you for your youth, but set the believers an example in. These are the qualities that we're looking for in our students. Like we like to focus on the first part of that scripture and say, our students can lead. No one should despise them because of their youth. And yes, 100%. But let's finish reading the scripture. We want our students to set an example in speech, how they talk, in their conduct, how they act, how they serve others, how they influence others in love. And the beautiful, unfailing love flowing out from us because of our relationship with Christ. Their faith, and of course, their purity, their ability to remain pure in heart and mind in a culture that often fights against that. You see, formation, it's revealed over time. Let's show them how to make 1 Timothy 4:12 come alive in a world that pushes against this very truth. Let's show them how to lead with a servant leader mindset. So ultimately, here's what I want you to remember. Academic success does not automatically produce leadership readiness. We tend to gravitate towards our students that are high achieving while sometimes neglecting. Maybe you don't do this. I'll say I am guilty of doing this. I gravitate towards the students who were academically successful, and I neglected looking at those quiet students that are often overlooked. But see, intentional formation will bring out the best in both types of students. And the thing that I love most about Jesus, which kind of goes against how I'm wired to run 90 miles an hour all the time, never stopping. But our God, he's never in a hurry. He's purposeful. He's right on time. And he has exactly what needs to happen. It's that posture of sitting down, taking a deep breath, and just being okay with that moment of stillness. You see, when we close the leadership gap with our students, students gain confidence. Leadership matures, and influence, their ability to influence, it becomes service. So I want to thank you for your faithful work of forming students, not just to succeed, but to lead with wisdom and maturity. So until next time, lead with intention, of course, teach with purpose, and trust that God is shaping leaders through your daily faithfulness. We'll see you next time.
Student Leadership and Learning is a presentation of the Association of Christian Schools International. Create enriching experiences beyond the classroom by visiting acsi.org/studentleadership.